Hey Crafty fam, it's Alex Vanover and welcome back to my craft room. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use printable vinyl with your Cricut. And the first step to using printable vinyl is picking a good file to use for a print and cut project. So I'm going to show you a bad example first before I show you a good example. One of my favorite things to print then cut, unfortunately, is watercolor flowers. But I will be honest, you guys, they're actually a really bad thing to print then cut. And the reason for that is because you're not going to use transfer tape with a lot of print then cut projects because it tends to pull the ink off of the page. So when you look at little flowers like this where it has all these little jagged edges, that's going to make it really difficult to get the flower off of the page without pulling off the vinyl or accidentally ripping some. And the other thing to remember, especially if you are using a Google image, is that if it's a bad image or like a low quality image, it's going to be a bad print and cut image as well. So you want to make sure that you choose a good file in the first place. So just keep that in mind when you are choosing your images, but I have chosen an image that I got from Design Bundles. The other thing to keep in mind when you're print then cutting things is that you want to use either a JPEG image or a PNG file. You can't do this with SVG files because Cricut is just going to import your image as an SVG and it's not going to know that you want to do print then cut. So when you buy things like I did from Design Bundles, luckily it comes with several versions of that same file, so it's easy, but I just want to let you keep that in mind if you're using another website where you're getting your file from. So even though I already have my image uploaded right here because I was working on this, I'm going to show you how to import it as a print then cut image just so you know. So I'm going to go to my craft file, my SVG files, and grab my Valentine's gnomes. So I'm going to use the PNG version of this file. That's going to go in really nicely and you'll see it appears on the left here. And then I'm going to make it complex and go to continue. And the nice thing about PNG files, this is one of the best things about them, is that they hold a transparent background. So when you see all these little checkerboards back behind your images, that means you don't have to delete anything or clean up your image at all in Design Space. So that's the benefit of using a PNG file if you have a transparent background. So I'm not going to erase anything and then I'm going to click continue. And then this is where it's going to differ from other projects. You're going to save it as the image on the left that is a print then cut image. And then normally you save things as a cut image like you do on the right, but as you can see, you can't see anything. But the image on the right does highlight. You see how there are very few jagged edges on these little gnomes. That's going to make it a lot easier for me to apply my printable vinyl to any project that I have because I'll just be able to peel up from the top and grab the whole image off really easily. So I'm going to name these little guys Valentine's gnomes and click save. So then we're going to click our image and insert it into our project. And something that you want to keep in mind is that you are limited in your print then cut size with the Cricut, and that is a limitation set by the Cricut software. So there's nothing that you can do to change that I know of. I've heard people talk about hacks and things like that to get around it, but honestly, that's all you need for the most part. So I'm going to show you how we are going to take care of this, and you'll see this little caution sign here on my image, and that's exactly what it is saying. So when you are looking at a print then cut image, you are limited to a width of 6.75 inches across and 9 1/4 inches tall. That's just the limitation that you have. So I'm going to make my width 9 inches. And then I'm actually just going to turn it sideways so that we could take advantage of the full width. Whoops. We can take advantage of the full width of this image. I want to make it totally sideways. And that way it's only 4 1/4 or 4.2 inches wide now. So this is the perfect size for a print then cut project. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to shapes and insert a circle. And I'm just going to make it 1 inch. And the reason for this is because we're going to do a test cut with this material. I've used this this material before, so I know what setting I need on my printer, or excuse me, on my Cricut, but I want to make sure that you guys do too before anything gets messed up. So I've got these two different things here, and of course this little circle is going to stay on the line type is cut and no fill. But when you click your print then cut image, it should say cut under the line type, and it should say print under the fill. So that's how you know that you are in a good spot to make your print then cut project. So let's go to make it. And this is what a print and cut project looks like. You're gonna have this black border all the way around your image, and that is what they refer to as registration marks. That is what your Cricut is going to read when it cuts out this image, so that it knows where to cut out all of the borders. And so this box is just gonna change size depending on how much or how many images you have in your project. But if I was not doing this for an example, I would try to fill this project up as much as I could with other printable images. Because you are limited, you don't want to waste the rest of this paper. So I would probably put a few other small images in here with these gnomes. I'm not going to do that for this example, but I just want to make that known so that you don't waste as much of your material. But because you can see we have all this open space over here that's not going to be used by our project, that is where we are going to do our test cut, which is where we're going to cut our circle. That way you can make sure before you cut this big image that you're not wasting a whole sheet of vinyl because you're not using the right cut setting that works for your machine. So let's go to the continue screen. And the first thing that we're going to do before we cut our image, that's just my maker turning on. So before we cut our image, we have to send our image to our printer. And so one thing that I pretty much always do on mine is add the bleed. So you want this little box checked right here. That's just gonna put a little bit of a border around all of your images so that if your Cricut is slightly off in cutting, it still looks nice and clean. Let me switch your view over to the printer and I'll show you what it really looks like to print on your printable vinyl. So once you get your printer turned on, the first thing that you need to do is insert your vinyl. And if you've never done this before with your printer, I highly recommend doing this test before you print anything that you need to print on a certain side. So basically what you want to do is put a piece of paper in your printer and you want to label the areas that you can see. And then you want to just randomly print. This is just like a screenshot from Wayfair because that happened to be the website I was on. But you want to make sure that you do this so that you know how to orient your printable vinyl when you put it in your printer, because otherwise you may print your image on the wrong side of your vinyl. So I know that when I lay my vinyl down, I'm going to lay it with the back side up and it's going to print like this. So just make sure you do that test if you haven't already. But I always keep this piece of paper near me when I'm using my printable vinyl so that I don't use it on the wrong side. We're going to be using the StarCraft Matte Inkjet Printable Vinyl in this project. I love this stuff. It works amazing and it doesn't clog my printer, so I love this stuff. And by the way, as far as printers, I use the Epson Workforce Pro WF-3720. I have this on my Amazon store, so I will make sure to link this below for you guys if you want to try this. This is the printer that Troy from TroyTube recommends. It is phenomenal. I have used it so far in all my tests and I absolutely love it. So if you are looking for a printer, this is a pretty reasonably priced one. The ink is a little bit pricey, so that is something to keep in mind, but I don't use a ton of ink unless I'm crafting, especially colored ink, so that part doesn't bother me too much, but that is something that you may want to keep in mind. So I'm gonna grab a sheet of this, and I'm going to stick it in my printer first. It is really thick, so make sure that you're only grabbing one piece of vinyl, but the back is really easy to identify because it has all this printing on it. So I'm just gonna pull out my little tray. And notice that I don't have any other paper in here because if anything happens to my printable vinyl, I don't want to start printing on regular pieces of copy paper. So I'm just gonna stick my vinyl in here just face down and then close my tray. And on my printer, I just have to tell it plain paper. So you may use some other printer settings when you're printing other things, but I just leave it on plain paper and that works for me. And then we're gonna hop back into Design Space and we are going to select the print button. right, and that's how this looks when it's all printed out. And just as a reminder, I printed it as 9 inches wide. So that's the size of my project. So you do get a lot of this, you do get to use a lot of the piece of paper if you make your images nice and large. And I'm not gonna be using the UV laminate in this project, but if you are going to be putting your printable vinyl on something that is going to get a lot of use, or especially if it's going to come in contact with any water. So if you're going to make it as a decal for a vehicle or put it on a tumbler where it's going to be hand washed or anything, this is the point where you would want to put some laminate over top of it. And I'll show you guys what to do, but I'm not gonna do this for this project because I'm just gonna leave this on an indoor sign or something. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to use it for. But basically, and it comes in gloss and matte, so you can keep it a matte finish if you want to. But the way that this works is the UV laminate is just this really glossy sheet. So you would hold the UV laminate over top of your project and mark how much you want to cut off your sheet. Then you would just apply this clear laminate and follow it up with a nice squeegee so that you get out all the bubbles, and you'll actually cut it in your Cricut with the laminate on top of it if you're going to use it. So I just wanted to make sure I made that note in case you guys are interested in that. But as long as you're going to be using something that's not handled a ton, without the laminate is going to be just fine for us. Let me switch over our view back to Design Space and I'll show you how to set up your Cricut for a print then cut. So we are going to do our test cut on light cardstock because that's how I know my Cricut works with this printable vinyl. That light cardstock is where we recommend that you start your test cutting, but make sure that you do, you cut your little 1-inch circle with one cut like this and make sure that's actually going to work. So now that we are ready to do our test cut, we are going to perform the test cut on the same sheet of vinyl as we are cutting our printable project. So I want you to flip it so that the printable piece of the project is on the right hand side of the paper, and then you have the left side clear. You do not want to do your test cut inside or even around these black lines, even going in this way a little bit, because that's what your Cricut is going to read. This top left corner is not going to be used by the Cricut anyway, and you're not going to be able to make another printable project with it, so you might as well just use it for a test cut. So you're going to load it with, again, the printable part of the project on the right side of the mat, and we're going to be using this upper left-hand corner of our piece of paper, and you're just going to line it up like you normally would on the top right-hand corner of the mat. And I'm going to be performing my test cut on light cardstock because I know that's what works for my machine, and that's where we recommend you start, and then if this test cut doesn't work properly, then you can make some other arrangements for cut settings. So I'm just going to load into my machine and press go. All right, so as you can see, that little 1-inch test cut in the corner of my vinyl, let's just make sure that that peels up okay. Probably shouldn't have done this on my mat, but it comes up really well and doesn't have any jagged edges. So now I'm gonna flip my project around so that I can go ahead and cut my project. Be really careful when you're peeling it up off a mat if you have a newer mat like I do, so that you don't curl your project up real bad. That would make it difficult to put on the mat. So now you're going to line up the printable side of the project on the left and have the white on the right, and you're just gonna load it like you normally would, and that upper left hand corner of the mat. Make sure that it's really nice and smoothed down. Make sure that you're nicely close to those lines on the mat so that your Cricut has an easy time reading it. I'll double check and make sure that I'm on the print and cut mat. Then I'll insert my project and press the go button. You'll notice that before it starts actually cutting the project, it's going to use its little sensor to read the registration marks, and that's kind of a fun little thing to watch. So it's reading the distance between the outside of the vinyl and the black line. now that it's done scanning, it can start cutting. So once your project is done cutting, you can unload it from the mat. But if you use the either gloss or UV laminate with your printable vinyl, here's where you want to do another cut. And the way that you do another cut exactly like this one is you want to just press the C button again without unloading your mat. So don't press the blinking arrow, press the C button again if you're using laminate with your printable vinyl. But if not, as soon as you unload your vinyl from your Cricut, you're all set. That's it. So then you can peel up your vinyl and apply it to anything that you're going to apply it to. You just want to make sure that you do that by hand without any transfer tape. So just be careful and go slow, and that's it. So make sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram because I will find a use for these cute little gnomes and I'll put them on something. I haven't decided what I'm going to put them on yet. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/DIY Alex Vanover or on Instagram at DIY Alex Vanover. I'll be sure to post a final project so that you guys can see how these guys turned out. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the comments for me. I'm Alex Vanover and I hope we can craft again soon.